practice by the end of this week.
Okay, as you can see, this is joint work with Charles and with Jeff, and we're interested in an inductive tool for dealing with three-connected two-poly matroid. Of course, the Wheels and Whirls theorem, which is a very familiar result, gives you an inductive tool for dealing with three-connected matroids. Carolyn talked about this already today. If you've got a three-connected matroid, then you can find an element that can delete or contract and stay three-connected unless you're a wheel or a whirl. We want something like that for three-connected two-poly matroids. Now, the number of people who know what a two-poly matroid is very small. There's certainly a majority of them in this room, so I will tell you about what a three-connected two-poly matroid is. So I'll tell you what a two-poly matroid is and then what it means for a two-poly matroid to be three-connected. So let's start with just be back up. Applications of this theorem, you've got inductive applications and you've got constructive applications. So induction, you're sort of building down from the top. Constructive, you're building up from the bottom. Okay. Here's an example of a two-poly matroid. Just take a collection of points and lines in some matroid. Now, when I use the word point, I'm going to mean something of rank 1. Okay, when I use the word line, I'm going to mean something of rank 2. So take a collection of points and lines in a matroid and just define the rank of any union of that, any collection of points and lines, to be the rank in the matroid, the induced rank in the matroid. That will give you an example of a two-poly matroid. The pair that you look at is the ground set, that is this collection of points and lines, and the rank function. Now, when you deal with these two-poly matroids, of course, when you're dealing with matroids, you're familiar with bases and circuits and independent sets and rank function and closure and all this kind of stuff. With two-poly matroids and with polymatroids in general, you basically deal with the rank function. That's the primary thing that you're dealing with. Okay, here's another example. Take a graph, edge set E, and then for any set of edges, look at the set of vertices that get hit by that set of edges. The rank will just be that number. Okay, so that's another example of a two-poly matroid. So here it is again. What properties does this function have? Well, it's clearly integer valued, and it obeys the matroid rank axioms. Okay, so we have to remember what they are. Okay, the rank of the empty set is 0. The function is increasing. It's submodular. It's easy to check that it's submodular. And now we notice that we allow to have elements of rank 2 as well as having elements of rank 0 and 1. Okay. What's a k-poly matroid? So I've given you some examples of two-poly matroids. You've got a ground set, you've got a rank function, and this rank function obeys the rank axioms for matroids with one minor change. Okay, so the rank axioms, so what are the rank axioms? I just went through them. Rank of the empty set is 0, function's increasing, it's submodular, and this is the difference. This is where the k comes in, and k can be any integer. So what are matroids then?
One polymatroids?
Yeah, one. Matroids are just one polymatroid. That's it. Okay. Please feel free to interrupt me with questions.
Your rank functions are always integer valued?
Yes.
Well, if
That
you consider
explains matroids.
Sorry,
That explains matroid theory. They're just one polymatroids.
Henry, as always, Henry is very perspicacious.
if you consider a finite abelian P group, and then you consider the subgroups of the abelian group, and then you consider the rank to be the power of the exponent of P, would you find a polymatroid? You can also consider cyclic subgroups, for example.
We'll have to talk about that afterwards because I need to be refreshed on
Okay.
what key groups are and stuff like that. Okay.
Oh, groups of prime power order.
Yeah, but
Yes, we will talk about it.
good, thank you. Okay, so other questions that I can defer to later on? All right, let's go back to this, this two-poly matroid that I get from a graph. These things are called Boolean two-poly matroids. Now, why might you care about something like that? Okay, if I give you a matroid of a graph, can you tell me the graph? Yeah, not all. Up to Whitney to isomorphism. Okay. If I give you the Boolean two-poly matroid of a graph, and I tell you the graph's got no isolated vertices, then you know the graph. Okay? So there is some reason for working with these things. Of course, points and lines are very, very natural geometric things, but this, I think, is a sort of quite striking result once you see, oh, yeah, that's different. We don't have to invoke Whitney's two isomorphism theorem.
So, okay.
Go ahead, Gordon.
I was going to say, so loops have rank 1.
Loops have rank 1, yes. And so here's an example.
Can you tell the difference between a loop and a pendant edge?
Yeah, you just
That is right too.
pin and edge hits two vertices,
Yeah, okay.
the loop hits one.
Right.
Yep. Okay, so here's an example of a graph with a loop, and what I'm going to do is draw a geometric representation of this. Okay, so the loop in the graph is going to be something of rank 1, so geometrically that's a point, and the non-loop edges, they're going to have rank 2. So the rank of this whole thing is what? 4. Right, there are 4 vertices, exactly. Right, so, and I'm going to draw it with 2 planes. 3 is down the spine, and there it is. Now you see, you might think, okay, 1 and 2 meet at a point, but that's just saying these 2 things are in the same plane. Okay? So I don't have to put them, this vertex doesn't do anything. This point here is important. Its placement is locked in. So part of what I'm trying to do here today is to get you to get some intuition of what these two polymatroids are about. So questions?
You always can make this picture by just taking this thing as a subset of the syntax.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, how do you do deletion and contraction? Well, you know how to do deletion and contraction for matroids defined by the rank function. So you'll just do that. Remember these polymatroids, we're doing everything by the rank function basically. Okay, so deletion, what do? The rank function for the deletion is exactly the same as the rank function for the initial object, except that it's restricted. What about contraction? Well, this is the formula for the rank when you contract a set X in a matroid, and that's what it is in a K polymatroid, in a polymatroid in general. But deletion and contraction are fine.
It's like contracting the flat.
Yes, not contracting the flat.
Yeah.
But I mean, this formula is
Yeah.
valid for contracting any set.
Or it's like contracting both endpoints of the edge.
Yeah, that's right. You'll see what it is. It's quite a interesting thing. Okay, so let's look at this example. Now it's sort of obvious. I mean, here's a geometric picture. It's obvious what would happen if you deleted something. Delete a point or delete a line, you know, they're gone. Right, so I'm not going to show you that, but I am going to show you what happens when I contract the edge 3. Okay, now the edge 3's got rank 2. So when I contract it, the rank of this whole thing is going to drop by 2. So this, when you look at this contraction of the element 3, you're not just contracting the edge 3. Because that would only drop the rank by 1. Okay, so how do you do contraction? Well, geometrically what you do, stick 2 points freely on the line 3. And now contract them. You're about to say something. What is it you're about to say?
The loop is going to become an endless pointless.
Yeah, the loop sort of pops out into space, and they're called free loops. As Lusky calls them, free loops.
Those are called pointless edges or something.
Yeah, right.
Good name.
I like that name.
So this is what I've already said. This is the Matroid that you get. Okay, so 1 and 2 become parallel points, 4 and 5 become parallel points, and now, as I said, 6 is a loop. Now, I can represent this. There's a graph that corresponds to this. What is the graph that corresponds to this? It's a 2-vertex graph. 1 and 2 are at the same vertex, and 4 and 5 are at the same vertex, and you've got, as Irina has already pointed out, 6 is sort of floating freely in space. It's what's called a free loop.
I think pointless is better.
Yes.
Well, you'll have to discuss this with Tom Zaslowski. He's got quite strong opinions on nomenclature. Even stronger than I have, by the way. Okay, so let's think about this. This was a graph, and I did this contraction in the Boolean two-point matrix, and this is the guy that I got. What graph operation does this?
Contract
So like
the
a
edge,
dash- like a dash
contract
one
the
or
edge,
something?
delete the vertex, and all the edges that were incident with that vertex turn to loops.
Yeah. I'm sure this is Jeff's idea, so I'll give him credit to it. The way to think about this is, imagine this thing is made from sprung steel, okay? The edges are made from sprung steel, and these things here are sort of rivets, and they're holding the edges in position, okay? And when I contract an edge, what I do is I pull these rivets out, okay? And so the loop sort of pops out into space, and then the edges 1, 2, 4 and 5 sort of spring back on themselves. Okay? And there's a name for this operation. Boinging.
Oh, finally you got the terminology. That's right. Can I just interrupt one thing, because
Yes.
because really people have been asking about it, but if you know about matchings in the graph, the interesting thing is, if you know about coverage, you know it all satisfies a recursion in terms of deletion and contraction. If you know about matchings, the number of matchings in the graph is equal to the number of matchings in the deletion, plus the number of matchings in the voiding.
Yeah.
And it's easy to see, so it's just a natural operation if you think about matching. It's interesting.
Yeah, so Jeff and I did something on toponomers of two-poly matrix more than 20 years ago, if you can believe that.
Yeah.
Oh, again, looking at you.
Says the man who's having trouble adjusting to the fact that he just turned 50.
That was last year. Just in 51.
60 is pretty close. Okay, so this operation is reducing the rank by 2. So deletion probably doesn't change the rank. Contraction changes the rank by 2. Okay, so you might think that there's a gap there that perhaps needs to be filled, and I'll say something about that later on. Okay, here's just something that you can do structurally where do two polymatroids come from? Well, they all come from Matroid. Here's a natural way to build a two polymatroid from a Matroid, sorry, go the other way. Start with a two polymatroid, go to a Matroid. Just add points freely on every element. So when I add a point freely on the point 6, it sort of sits on top of the 6. When I add points freely on the line 1, 2, I get 2 points. Okay, so this is the associated natural Matroid, and this is a useful tool for dealing with these things. This is a well-known result. Every polymatroid comes from a Matroid. I'm just going to deal with the two polymatroid case. So all I do is, here's a Matroid. I happen to have labelled some of the points and some of the lines. So, can you move the cursor, please, Dylan? So the 1 and 2 label the same line. 3 labels a line. 7 is labelling a point there. 6 is labelling a line. 5 is labelling a point. 4 is labelling a line. Okay? And so now this is the associated two polymatroid. So the point 7 is on the lines 1 and 2.
One and two the same line?
Yeah, 1 and 2 are sort of parallel lines, if you like. They're sort of sitting on top of each other, the same way you talk about parallel points. And this is, of course, only in rank 3. So every two polymatroid arises in this way from a labelled matrix. So they're not really bizarre structures. They're structures that are familiar to you. It's just that I'm labelling some of the flags, not just the points. Question? Okay. Now we come to connectivity functions. Now, you know how a connectivity function is defined for a matroid. Connectivity of a set is the rank of the set plus the rank of the complement minus the rank of the matroid. That is what it is for a two polymatroid. So that's easy. And why is a connectivity function submodular for a matroid? Because the rank function is submodular. Okay? So there's nothing hard about getting the fact that the connectivity function is submodular. It just works exactly the same as it does for matroids. Now we define what something means to be case-separating. So case-separating exactly as for matroids if the connectivity function is less than or equal to -1. It's two-connected if you do not have any one-separating sets. And it's three-connected if it's two-connected and you don't have any two-separating sets. And notice here that what I'm allowed to do here is, ordinarily in a matroid, I would insist that X had at least 2 elements. Here I'm going to allow something where the rank of X is at least 2. So that could be just a single element which happens to be a line. And these agree with the usual definitions for a matroid. So if the polymatroid happened to be a matroid, this would be the same. Questions on this? So everybody's happy about what two polymatroids are and what three-connectedness means for these guys? I'll give you some more intuition about that in a few minutes. Okay. So what's connectivity mean for Boolean two polymatroids? Now, that's this familiar thing where the rank function is defined by the number of vertices hit by a set of edges. Okay, here's a nice result. Take a loopless graph without isolated vertices. The polymatroid that you get from this is three-connected exactly when the graph is two-connected. So that will inform your intuition some more. Three-connected in this context just means two-connected in the graph context.
Why do you need loopless in there? What's that one?
I think you run into trouble if you put loops in bad places.
Aren't loops just vertices? Basically. And the syntax.
But two connected graphs allowed to have loops.
The two connected graphs are allowed to have loops.
It's just,
Yeah.
if you allow,
But if you
allow
put
loops
a
in-
couple of loops, if you put a couple of loops at the same vertex, that would give you
Right.
that would give you a problematic situation.
so it's just a terminology.
It's not really.
The three connected graphs are also allowed parallel edges, don't you run into problems there? Like are pairs of parallel edges in the Boolean two-poly matroid, do they give you a
They don't
separation?
give no.
No.
They don't give you a problem. So this is our goal. This Whitney's Tutt's wheels and whirls theorem. So we just really want an inductive tool for dealing with three connectivity for these structures. This is an example that shows you where things start to get nasty. So I'm just going to take a nice two-connected loopless graph, and I'm going to subdivide every edge. That's fine. Everything looks nice and happy. Okay. The problem is that for every edge, when you delete it, it's clear when you delete the edge, you're killing two connectivity in the graph. When you contract the edge from the Boolean two-poly matrix, now that means you're going to have to boing, right? And when you boing, things go bad on you in terms of connectivity.
Yeah, I mean, there's a third operation you could do. Right? You could place two elements freely on flat, contract one, delete the other. So that sits between deletion and boiling. Wouldn't that preserve connectivity?
That's a very good question, Rudy. If you wait, you will see that we will give the answer to that. You've indeed spotted exactly what we do.
Okay.
Take an element. So Rudy's anticipated this. We want something that will be like graph contraction. How would you do it? We call it compression. Follow just what Rudy said. Freely add an element on the element x. Now x might be a point, or it might even be a loop. Let's think of it as being a line because that's a really interesting case. Contract that element out and then delete the thing. So if it's a point, something of rank 1, when you compress it, it's the same as doing contraction. If it's a loop, something of rank 0, when you compress it, it's the same as doing deletion. In general, this is the way it's defined, if you really want to see a definition, but I think that this description in green is the easiest way of understanding it. And it's just exactly what Rudy said. So questions about that? Okay. And indeed, it is an analogue of compression in the graph. If you look at the Boolean two-poly matroid coming from a graph, compress the edge, it's exactly the same as contracting the edge in the graph and taking the Boolean two-poly matroid away. Okay. Now we come to these separating sets that we call prickly three separating sets, and you'll sort of see why we call them that. When you have two edges meeting a vertex of degree 2 in a graph, that's an example of a three separating set. It's an example of a prickly three separating set. What's a prickly three separating set more generally? Well, okay, I want you to look at this geometrically. So here's a line. So now I'm rank 2, rank 3, rank 4, and I stay in rank 4. So this is all in rank 4. Okay, the lines L1, L2, and L3 form a prickly three separating set. It's attached to the rest of the two-point matrix across this line L0, which may or may not be there. Okay, so we sort of think of these as being spikes sticking out of the thing. We couldn't use the word spike because that's already been used, so prickly became opposite. Okay, so here's a definition. It's a little bit cumbersome, but A prickly three separating set, you've got it's a set of lines, there are at least two of them. It's a three separating set, so that's what the second thing says. And then the third one, when you add a set Z prime of these lines, the rank goes up exactly as the cardinality of Z prime, unless Z prime is a whole of Z. And the rank of Z prime is 2, they're lines. Goes up by 2 each time you add one, until you add the last one, the rank only doesn't go up. But I think that, I really think that this is the way to think about prickling through separating sets. Yes, very good.
Could you show the definition again on the next slide?
Yeah.
They're like double flowers. Actually.
Yeah, it's that I don't remember all of the stuff that's in that. What Rudy's referring to is that there's in the book by Plummer and Lovask and Plummer, the orange book called Matching Theory, there's quite a bit of stuff done on two polymatroids, in particular they're interested in matching and stuff like that. And there are these objects called flowers, and I don't remember the exact definition of those because we didn't use those in the stuff, and I'm over 60, so I don't remember anything.
So shouldn't that be, I should know this, but when you're adding the lines, each time you add a line, you're only adding one to the rank of the whole thing. Maybe I've just misunderstood the definition.
That's what's happening there, yeah, that's happening in the second step there.
So I just can't see how the rank goes up by 2.
And the final thing.
I'm just looking in Z prime. I'm just looking in Z prime. So I go back.
It doesn't go up by 2. It's sines of Z prime plus 2, not 2 times the sines of Z prime.
See, look, this is one line, so that's rank 2.
Oh, okay.
Add another one, goes up to 4. I'm just when I just I mean that part is just.
No, it's all right.
Okay.
Yeah. Just
Cardinality plus 2.
You're happy now? Okay. Here's an interesting result. When you've got one of these prickly three separating sets, they really are nasty because you delete an element, you're not three connected anymore. You contract an element, you're not three separating anymore. Now, that's not good. We're trying to be able to delete an element or contract an element and recover three connectivity. We can't do it when we've got one of these prickly guys. You actually need connectivity. You actually need this issue here about this having cardinality bigger than or equal to 3. Here's an example. So let's see what happens. If I delete the element E, then you can see that I've destroyed 2 connectivity of the graph. So I'm not going to be 3 connected. What happens if I contract the element E in the Boolean 2 polymatroid? What do you get? What graph do you get?
Triangle with 3 loops.
Yes, it's a triangle with 3 loops. And that is 3 connected. Not 3 connected, sorry. That's not 3 connected.
Why not?
Yeah.
Oh. Did I make a mistake?
No, because when that means that the prickly things aren't problematic and have size 2. That's what you're trying to show.
Oh yeah, okay, sorry. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So you need this hypothesis that the number of elements is at least 3 to get this. Questions? Okay. So here's our theorem. When is a 2 polymatroid pure? Just means that every element's an element. Every element's a line. So all the elements have the same rank, that rank being 2. Okay. 3 connected, non-empty, 2 polymatroid. It has an element so that the deletion or the contraction is 3 connected. Now this has got to include Whitney's, I keep saying Whitney, Tutt's wheels and whirls theorem. So one of the possibilities has got to be the wheels and whirls theorem. So the rank is at least 3, you get a whirl or the cyclomatroid of the wheel. What's the other possibility? The other possibility is that the matroid is pure, it's got a prickly 3 separating set, and every time you compress an element in that prickly 3 separating set, you recover 3 connectedness. And notice that we've got this dichotomy here that 2 is what happens for matroids. We get matroids. 3, you're only dealing with Boolean pure 2 polymatroids. Any questions about that?
Can you give some intuition for what compressing something in a prickly 3 separating set looks like?
Yeah, I'll do that. Okay.
So, I mean, I don't know if you're going to talk about it, but there is something to say as to why you only want to do compression in certain situations. Like it's not
Yes,
something you
that's what I'm about to do.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So I want to talk next about. Let me go to the draw. Do I block you if I stand here?
Oh, that's okay.
Okay, so I want to talk about the analogue of Rhoda's conjecture. What does it mean for? Actually, you can't see this. Okay, I'll go back up again. Can I block you, Charles?
Sure.
What does it mean for a polymatroid to be F representable? Well, it's exactly what you'd expect. Take a vector space. Each member of the ground set labels some subspace, and the subspace might receive multiple labels. And what you want is that the dimension function in the vector space matches the rank function in the matrix. So I'm going to look at the Varmosh matroid, which I've labelled in a slightly bizarre way. So the Varmosh matroid here, I've got this plane, this plane, this plane, this plane, and a plane through the middle. So there are 5 4-point planes. And in particular, B1, B2, T, Y1 has got rank 4. Okay, now you'll see in a moment why I care about that. What I'm going to do to this is I'm going to add a point freely, x1 freely on the line, T, Y1. So I'm only dealing with matroids here. I haven't done 2 polymatroids on this yet. It's only matroid. Now I'm going to take a binary spike with tip T and legs T, X, I, Y, I. So you know what a binary spike looks like. This is a crummy representation of a binary spike because there's a lot of stuff missing. But of course the rank of this thing is supposed to be R. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue across this line T, X1, Y1. I'm going to glue this thing onto the Varmosh matrix. And I mean that's why I took the thing to be binary. It turns out binary is not important here. I could use any spike. But it's useful here because this is now a well-defined operation. Gluing across a binary spike is, you can do it by generalized parallel connection. Okay, so I glue this thing across and then I delete this T, X1, Y1. Now what I'm going to do is concentrate just on the lines that I have. So I glued across this thing here. I'm going to keep this line, this line, this line. I'm also keeping this line, and this line. So the objects in my rank R+2 pure 2 polymatroid are lines. It turns out that these matroids, P, 2 polymatroids PR, they're not representable over any field, but all their proper deletions and contractions are representable over them. So again, take a finite field, this 2 polymatroid PR is not F representable, but all of its deletions and contractions are F representable. So if you wanted Rota's conjecture and you're only going to allow these operations of deletion and contraction as I've defined them, then you're not going to get it. And you can modify this example very simply to get that there's a counterexample of Rota's conjecture for all K when you're dealing with K polymatroid. Questions about that?
How about compression?
Good question. You know, in these old comedy shows, they would always have a stooge in the audience. I won't give you the money now, Rudy, but later on. Okay.
James has got to hypnotise you later too.
These lines that I happen to use from the binary spike, the ones that are left, they form a prickly 3 separating set. And when you compress one of them, you get the next smallest guy. Okay? So that operation looks like it might be a good operation to add to just deletion and contraction if you were trying to get an analogue of Rota's conjecture. And we might be interested in doing that. Okay, now what about preserving representability under compression? Can you do, I mean, I've introduced this new operation, you think, okay, well, fine, perhaps everything behaves well. Well, actually things don't behave particularly well. If you're in a prickly 3 separating set and you compress an element and you start off F representable, you will stay F representable. Okay? So that's nice. But in general, compression can wreak havoc with representability. And I'll give you a simple example. Take the 2 polymatroid whose elements are the 35 lines of PG32. So this is a rank 4 binary projective space and it's got 35 lines. Now I'm going to compress one of these lines. Okay. It's not binary. Do you believe that that's not binary? Because what happens is that the rank goes down to 2 and basically you get too many lines. How many lines can you have in a rank 3 2 polymatroid which is binary? And it's got no parallel lines. How many lines can you have?
Rank 3, was that?
Rank 3, binary, 2 poly... 7! Right, and it's just a finite matroid.
Yeah.
Right, but you can't get more than 7, right, without making them parallel. What happens here is when you do this compression, you get more than 7. Okay? So, poof, it was binary, Dylan.
Would it be natural to think about representability over extension fields in this context? So you're adding elements freely, which you can't do over GF2, but you can do it over an extension field of GF2.
Yeah,
You can, you'll preserve representability over infinite fields with this prickly thing.
Yeah,
it's just the size of the field becomes
The
the
size
problem.
of the field becomes an issue.
Yeah, so
But if you want,
so then maybe it's, instead of thinking about representability over a field, maybe it's more natural to think about representability over characteristics.
I think all hell breaks loose, though, if you want to think about Rota's conjecture and stuff like that.
Yeah, but
We are still going for Rota's conjecture, so we're going for a fixed field, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you'd end up with a class that's closed under compression and deletion and contraction. Maybe that's good.
So we have these new types of minors that we call P minors, and as Rudy has anticipated already, we're going to allow not just deletions and contractions, but we're going to allow prickly compressions, and a prickly compression is just the compression of an element from a prickly free separating set. Here's an interesting observation about what these P minors look like. They relate to topological minors. So you don't want isolated vertices, you don't want loops, and you don't want these free loops. These are these things with no vertices. If you exclude those, G1 is a topological minor of G2 if and only if the Boolean 2 polymatroid of G1 is a P minor of G2. So it's quite a nice notion, this P minor, because it's capturing topological minors for graphs. So you may think it's sort of artificial, but this suggests that it's probably not. Questions about that? Okay. What about infinite anti-chains? So we've been talking about the analog of Rota's conjecture. What about the analog of infinite anti-chains in, say, F-representable 2 polymatroid? Well, it's known that the class of graphs is not well quasi-ordered under topological minors. And here's an example that you might use to show that. Look at these guys. This is an infinite anti-chain under topological minors. If you do an easy calculation, you can show that these guys are F-representable for all fields. So you're not going to be able to get some analogue of the infinite anti-chain result or the lack of infinite anti-chain result, even when you allow this P minor in operation. Here's the conjecture that we make in this context. When you allow the operations of deletion, contraction, and prickly compression, then you recover Rota's conjecture. Now, we haven't made any genuine attempt to prove this, but we were convinced that it might be reasonable. Go ahead.
What goes wrong in this if you don't allow prickly compression? Is it the Vacquerie thing?
The Vacquerie thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you think that, so you think that there's no way to construct a four connected example, class of examples or something like that?
Well, that's what the word conjecture would imply.
It just seems prickly compression isn't strong enough to deal with the issues that...
Yes, and that may well be true, and we put some, what do they call them? There's some prevarication in our paper in the sense that we say we conjecture this, but we're not 100% certain. In fact, we're not really sure that we should conjecture this, but we're going to do it anyway.
Yeah. So you could weaken the conjecture actually. You could say, you could talk about you could make your class of compressions richer by just observing that you're always doing a compression that would, in a representable case, preserve representability. So prickly might just be the first. We ran into prickly, right? And if you started working on this, odds are you'll run into other things. That's not. But you might as well conjecture the strongest possible thing and see.
Yeah, so I think this is a conjecture in the Dominic Welsh style of trying to induce other people to work on this sort of thing. And if it's not right, then it's not right.
But it's okay, because it'll always be referred to as conjecture by Oxley et al. So it's never an issue.
Most of my conjectures are false, is what Charles is saying. Okay, so here's the main theorem again. I don't have much time, but let me remind you about the main theorem. So you've got this, included in here is the Wheels and Whirls theorem, and then you've got this other case where you can do compression. Duality is a tool that we use in the proof. Now, I haven't mentioned duality for 2 polymatroids, and Jeff and I did, as I mentioned before, something on top polynomials for 2 polymatroids, and we had a version of duality there, which is called 2-dual. It's not the version of duality we use in this context. This is the duality formula for the rank function of a matroid. And the version that we used in the polynomial stuff was you just take this x cardinality and you multiply it by 2. And that gives you another 2-poly matroid. But it doesn't work in this context. So McDiarmid defined a whole family of potential duals for 2-poly matroids. And we use one of them, and we couldn't even agree on which one we would use. This is the one, so whoever wrote the paper had the choice of what the duality would be. And this is the one we came up with. This is the contentious term here. And it really comes down to what do you do for elements of rank 0? If you define it in this way, this agrees with the usual definition of duality for matroids. But if you're interested in connectivity function, you might be interested, this is the version that is favoured. So you don't have anything special here. You don't have this max condition. So you could, this might be viewed as a cleaner thing. For what we do in the context of this paper, it really doesn't matter because loops don't come up really at all. Since we're dealing with 3-connectedness, it really doesn't matter which one we use. But so this is the version that I'm going to talk about. There it is. It behaves nicely with respect to duality and compression behave nicely. So if you take the dual and you compress, it's the same as compressing and taking the dual. You need a little condition about having no parallel line. So that's kind of nice. And it sort of suggests, okay, we had duality and we had, we had deletion and we had contraction. And now we've got this sort of intermediate operation. That's the fact that it behaves nicely on duality is good. 3-connected 2-poly matroids behave well. The dual of the dual is the 2-poly matroid, and 3-connectedness is preserved. So this is the main theorem again, and it breaks into 2 cases. When you've got a point, a rank 1 element, and when you consist entirely of lines. When you've got a point, the argument is basically exactly the same as the argument that you would use to prove Tufts wheels and wheels theorem. You prove a generalisation of Bixby's lemma, but you just do it by the same method as normal, except that you're dealing with 2-poly matrix. You prove that if you've got a point so that neither the deletion nor the contraction is 3-connected, then you've got 2 other points, rank 1 things, so that you form a triangle in the 2-poly matroid or its cubic. Now that you've got a triangle or a triad, you can start off and build fans. And so you build fans and you just get wheels or whirls. And that's really easy. The case when M consists entirely of lines is more difficult. You get a 3 separating set. You can prove that you get a 3 separating set. And then you prove that you get a prickly 3 separating set. And that's work. And that's really the majority of work in the paper. And so here's the main theorem one more time. And I want to finish with a consequence of that, which I think is slightly surprising. 3-connected, pure 2-poly matrix, no single element deletion or contraction is 3-connected, then every compression is 3-connected. So this compression is quite a useful operation. And we are hoping that the next step that we will do, moving to a splitter theorem, is not going to be as tortuous as some other splitter theorems that certain members of the audience have spoken about earlier today. Thank you very much.
Who is this John work with? I must have missed this at the beginning.
These two gentlemen over here.
Ah.
That last comment sounded like the triumph of hope over experience.
Well, you can see that we got there, but it was, you know, it was a journey, as you've said.
I mean, that's more or less the same question I asked Carolyn. Do you have any conjectures about two-poly matroids that these connectivity inductive tools would hopefully help you solve?
No.
But as one of the co-authors, can I say what reawoke my interest in two-poly matroids was the result on connectivity functions, that every unit of connectivity function is essentially up to a scaling factor, the connectivity function of two-poly matroid. So two-poly matroids capture, I mean, even though somehow they're just matroidal in the sense that James said everyone comes from a matroid, they capture all unitary connectivity functions as well. So it just sort of, in my mind, it just meant that there was sort of all of a sudden just exploring the world of two-poly matroids and what you could do with them just became a lot more interesting to me because of that. But that was and also I think they're sort of quite cute in a way. Like geometrically they're quite pleasant to work with.
Yeah, working with points and lines is just sort of, it seems so natural geometrically. I mean, I don't feel the same way about points, lines and planes, by the way. I mean, I think points and lines just have a, we've played with them sort of all of our lives in geometry, and somehow it doesn't feel like different. Although, I mean, when you think about the fact that 3 lines in the plane that form this kind of structure are no different from 3 lines in the plane that form that kind of structure, that's slightly disconcerting. But you just have to get used to that.
So is it?
Yeah.
Oh, if two-poly matroids, are they locally defined by looking at what happens to rank on middle close of length 2 and Boolean algebra points of the two-poly matroid? That's true for matroids, and makes an easy definition of duality by just inverting the Boolean algebra and subtracting all the rank values from the top value.
I haven't thought about that. I haven't talked to you about that afterwards.
The way things are happening,
That's an interesting idea, thank you. Alright.
So I assume there's a, you did the two-connected chain theorem, so how about two-connected? I assume there's a chain theorem for two-connected?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I thought it would start from there.
So there was something. There's something about that.
I'm sure we thought about that.
No, something
You can
else.
see the collective, I mean, 3 authors over 50 and we all look at each other and try to remember who's responsible for remembering it. One of us puts our head down and scratches our head, the other one waddles on, and I'm trying to divert attention away from myself. So the answer is that this is probably doable and it's probably not too hard.
But it hasn't been done.
If I think if I've got 2 blobs, right, that so correct me if I'm wrong here. If I've got 2 blobs and they're direct sums of things, and then I connect them by a line, so that's a 2-connected thing, right? So, and then I think if I take that line, if I delete it, I'm disconnected, and if I contract it, the first point brings them back, and then I contract the next disconnects them. So I think that's a counterexample. So it looks like the 3-connected situation is simpler than the 2-connected.
Oh.
So I think, and so that's just.
But you might need a
Compression.
Compression might do it.
Yeah. So there's so.
Yeah, I mean,
What
just
is
slightly
slightly
unnerving
unnerving is
is
we
right.
didn't think about it.
that's the honest answer. We just went straight for the 3 connected.
And what about preserving minors. Well, splitter theorem for people.
Yeah, that's, I think that's Matroid, isn't it?
Yeah, we looked at that in Wellington when James and Charles were and we just started to sort of see the horrors of the next sort of phase. And what can, and we come up with counterexamples to say it's going to be not very nice. But someone, I hope was it made, someone asked about the question of whether or not it made a difference, whether or not you've got an isthmus or a loop in a graph. And that does make a difference to the two polymatroid, because you sort of get this rank 2 elements sticking out, or else you get this rank 1 point. But actually, if you think about the connectivity function of the two polymatroid, you can't tell the difference from the connectivity function, whether you've got a rank 2 element sticking out, because that gives you lambda equals 1, or whether you've got just a point. So there's sort of another operation that you can do on two polymatroids, which is a bit like a sort of a simplification, where when you get these rank 2 elements sticking out, you could always replace them by points, which is quite natural because you're not actually changing the connectivity function. You wouldn't be changing any representability property or anything like that. And I think there will be a splitter theorem if every time you delete something and create these sticking out lines, this is called, there's a name for it, I've got to remember.
Compactification.
Compactification.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, you compress that down so that you don't have, this sort of, you don't have any elements whose rank is higher than their connectivity. They seem to cause problems. And I think if you allow this compactification operation, you probably could get a nice splitter theorem of that. I think we'll have to go working on that. Some stuff.
You're the chair, Peter. You couldn't help me.
Thank you, James.
For the picnic,